Hey there! So in today's video I'm going to be talking about the units that have already released in Korea but not yet in the global server around us. So it's a little sneak peek video, right? I'm going to be talking about units in the order that they were released in Korea, which is not exactly the order they will release in the global server. They do not follow like directly the Korean schedule, and also of course the names are just rough translations, so they might differ, but in general this is going to be kind of the order they're going to be released and kind of the names they're going to get. So first of all, we're going to talk about Hanya and Curran. We are only going to cover 5-star units, by the way. I might cover 4 stars in another video, otherwise it's going to take way too long. So Hanya is an attacker. He's really good. When he was released, he was quite insane, to be honest. He was everywhere. Nowadays he's still used quite a bit, but not that much. He's just an option between many. So why is he so good? He's kind of a glorified in-rank in the fact that he hits the back and has 3 tiles instead of 2, which is absurd. He has such a huge AoE and it's so good. He also has extra scaling with tombstones, so the more enemies and allies that die, he gains more damage, which is pretty good. And it also has damage at the beginning of the match, and also deals extra damage for attackers and support units. But here's the thing, early on he's not going to be doing that much damage. He's not going to one-shot tanks or anything. He's really balanced. He's only really going to like exploit his huge AoE and kill the squishies. Later on though, he scales really hard with this skill and does a lot of damage. But he's quite squishy and hits such a huge range, he's probably gonna die right after he attacks to a counter unit that has like counter damage. So he's still great, he does his job, he clears the back pretty fucking hard, he's absurd, he's really strong. Now the other unit is Curran. Where is she? Over here. So Curran is kind of a middle tier taunter. As you can see, she has 12 turns of taunt, which is pretty good, but she also has like very good defensive stats. If you look over here, she has 70% damage reduction, which is the cap, and also gets 70% agility, so that's pretty good, but she doesn't really hold herself too well. She can reach like 100% defense for 4 turns only, which is not really enough, but it's pretty nice. Her main mechanic is that she marks the enemy when she attacks. She's a skip and a plus, by the way. So she attacks and marks the enemy. When that enemy specifically attacks her, she deals 120% HP fixed damage, which is pretty good, and it's a one-shot for every unit except Energy Guard, of course. But usually she's gonna do that, and a unit that wasn't marked is gonna attack her instead, and she's gonna die. So it's not really that good, it doesn't work that well. And she also has a little bit of damage to units that haven't been marked. So, and this one can crit, it's not fixed. So some people just run her own crit, so she can trade with one unit, and that's about it. She's very middle tier. The other banner that we're talking about is Edwin and Reckless. Let's start with Reckless. Reckless is a defender. She's over here, right there. So she's absurd. She's like a huge meta swing when she releases because of this skill over here. So she has her human form and her doll form. It's not exactly that, but something like that. So for the first 5 turns, she is in human form. After those 5 turns passes, she goes to doll form for 5 turns, then comes back to human form, and it keeps going. It's just automatic, it doesn't rely on attacks or anything. But what happens is in human form, she gets permanent taunt and damage reduction. And then in doll form, she's pretty much Zakan. She takes extra damage, and she'll die 100% of the time in doll form and kill back, right? So it's pretty much a Zakan. But what's cool is that at the beginning of the match, you don't need to like attack with her to activate the taunt. You need to do anything, you just put her in your team, and for the first 5 turns, she has taunt. So her usage, her main usage at least, is on defense. You just run her in your team, and when the unit attacks, he's gonna be attacking her. It's like a free taunt without even having to move. So you absolutely protect your team against the first attack of the enemy, which is really relevant. This is really good. And for that reason, you only have 5 turns. So kind of a anti-meta strategy was to push for 6 turns. So you will use like a lot of mages and supports, so your first attacker will attack at turn 6, which means she's in doll form and won't taunt, so you can actually get the benefit of the first attack. But that's pretty much it. She has like curse counter, which is kind of cool. She can tank a little bit with damage reduction and curse counter, but she's mainly good because of the taunt at the beginning of the match, which is just absurd. The other unit is Edwin. He's a mage, he's over here. So Edwin is really good as well. So when he was released, people didn't really use him that much, but then they realized he's actually kind of cool and that started using him, and nowadays he's falling a little bit again, but he's a pretty good unit all in all. So let's talk about that. His main mechanic is kind of a glorified charm. It's a stigma skill, so it goes through attack interference immunity and attack interference removal by supports, so it's more consistent than charm, but works the same really. It happens when he attacks the last in this shape over here, which is really good, but he's quite tanky, right? He has damage reduction, he has curse counter, so he can tank really well, and he's used to counter Vouches, weak Vouches. I think Voucher plus 10 with good runes can one-shot him, but other than that he tanks them really well. So that's Edwin. Next banner is Antonio and Anastasia. I'm gonna talk about Anastasia first because she's the more relevant one. She's this maid over here. She's a pretty solid attacker, like she does a lot of damage and can be quite good with her AoE, though she is just an option between many good attackers that are gonna be released. So she doesn't particularly affect the meta by herself, but she's really good. She has like stat weakening immunity, which makes her really good against curse counter units. You don't need Satis with her. She has the same scaling as Voucher, though a little bit toned down, but it's really good. You run her on double crit damage and she gets like a lot of attack and crit rate and does absurd damage, though her main damage mechanic is kind of inconsistent. She does like extra damage to the main target guaranteed, and then more damage to attackers and supporters, which means not always she's gonna hit, like if she hits a tank with the borders of the AoE, she's not going to do additional damage, which makes it a bit inconsistent, but in general it works really well, and she dishes out like crazy amounts of damage. She's really good. She skips in a plus, that's just great. The other unit is Antonio. Antonio is kind of bad. He's a tank, but he doesn't have enough tanking capabilities to like actually tank, so he gets one shot all the time pretty much, and his main mechanic is that he has a really interesting attack range. He skips and attacks in this form over here, which is nice, and then he applies how's this called? God damn it, it's concentrated fire, which is like the debuff version of taunt, but really that's completely niche. It's just kind of used for, I don't know, some niche strategy for Guild Wars, something like that. In PvP he doesn't work at all. Now the next banner was Laura and Wilhelmina. Those two are crazy. Let's talk with Laura first. So Laura has a specific skill, which is the Pikachu skill. She has like she gives a barrier that has shock counter. So what happens is she buffs a pretty huge line. You can see at +9. It's like similar to Ludia, but with an extra style, which is insane. She can like, that's 5 units by that. That's really good. And then she gives this, which is irremovable by the way. So it gives damage reduction, which helps tanks really well, especially because it cannot be removed by Voucher and Foxy, for example, or any nullify units. At last 12 turns, as you can see, and when the enemy attacks you, you deal shock damage back to him. It's just really crazy because the enemy attacks you and you pretty much kill him back. It's really good, especially with more defensive decks, right? You give this to Mamoni and she tanks a lot and kills enemies back, which is pretty crazy. But of course it doesn't work against units with attack interference immunity because shock is an attack interference skill. And she has like pretty decent defensive buffs and nullify. She's just really great. The other unit is Wilhelmina over here. So she's quite unique and she's crazy. She's just probably the best warder in the game right now, tied with Foxy, but maybe better than her. So she hits the front in 1 tile, which is really bad. So for her to be good, you can see that she must have like a really strong kit, and she definitely does. So first of all, she hits 3 times, similar to Foxy, which is just really good against Lucius, and in general is really good scaling for nice damage. Other than that, she has a unique skill, which is a defense ignore skill. So it doesn't reduce, it's similar to fixed damage, but it doesn't reduce damage against like damage reduction from the enemy skills or barrier, that kind of thing. And also doesn't go through the agility checks, but still, it's pretty good. It's defense ignore. So she works like really well as against like Archon, Lillian, Lucius. Even though this doesn't work, she hits 3 times, which is pretty good. And in general, she does a lot of damage. She's really good. She has extra damage from this skill, and before attacking, she has debuff immunity, which makes her even more consistent. She's really, really good. And like, this kit can only be considered balanced because she hits front in 1 tile. Otherwise, she would be really crazy, but she's absurd. She's really good. Okay. Next unit I'm going to be talking about is a mage. He's called Lumen. He's from the banner that released Lumen and Arwen. So Lumen is kind of interesting. I like him, but he's a bit niche. He skips and hits 3 tiles, so it's very similar to Christina, right? He deals extra damage based on a crit rate and a very nice amount. He has high attack, of course. This is awesome. He has taunt ignore, which is absolutely relevant. He has buffs similar to Edwin, no, not Edwin, Edin, of course. So he gets like a lot of damage from these alone, which is really good. So he does a lot of damage, hits this way, has extra damage and taunt ignore, and doesn't get fucked by curse counter. So that's really good. But the problem is that his attack range isn't really good enough for a mage, of course. This for a warrior, this would be insane. But for a mage, a skip like Christina, right, it's not good enough. But he's still interesting. I like him, though he's not used that much. The other unit though is Arwen. She is quite niche as well. She's not used that much, but she's really interesting. So she has like her own taunt, which is only 6 turns, but every time she is attacked, she has more taunt, more 4 turns of taunt. So she can kind of keep taunting forever as units attack her. She also gets, when attacked, armor, which can make her reach 100% defense, which is amazing. And of course debuff immunity, so she's really tanky. She also like removes the enemy's buffs after the attack, so it reduces the damage from additional damage. She has healing. She's really interesting, and her base stats are actually really good as well. As you can see, she is really interesting. I really like her, but she doesn't hurt herself that well, and it's kind of a weird spot where she kind of gets one shot anyway, but she's interesting, though niche. Now the last banner is Ludia and Idolyn. Let's talk about Ludia first. She's a defender as well. She has an interesting mechanic that buffs Azeew procs. Instead of giving 35, they give extra 65 at max level, so that's 100%. So if she procs agility, she doesn't take any damage at all. Of course, fixed damage still goes through, but she does like tank. For example, the unit I just talked about, Wilhelmina, she has defense ignore, which still gets reduced by the agility proc. So she can tank her, which is really good. And she has like, to make it consistent, she has pretty much, she gets extra defense from runes, and she converts all the defense into agility. So you can get like 90% agility, 80 something percent agility. So there's a little bit of RNG involved. She doesn't have great base stats, as you can see. So she will get one shot if she doesn't proc the agility. So it's a lot of RNG, but this thing lasts 50 turns. So in the end, she ends up working as kind of a glorified Lillian. She's very similar, but there's the RNG part and there's the huge investment part, because you want to get her to, I don't think you can do the plus 10, but plus 9, right? When Lillian only needs plus 3, but she has the potential to be way better and lasts like 50 turns instead of just 2 rounds like Lillian. So it's definitely interesting, though she's not being used that much when it comes to use rates. Some people in the super high ranks are using her, so she's interesting, but we'll see how it goes. It's not too sure right now. And the other unit that I want to talk about is Idolyn. She is amazing. She's like Mamone's best friend. She works as a 5-star John, in the sense that she does give taunt, and she gives taunt for 12 turns, and there's extra damage reduction, which is not scaling with her support. It's just fixed 50%. So she does need some extra damage reduction from barrier, from like Laura for example, to reach the maximum, which is 70% of course. But what makes her interesting is that she has a lot of good offensive buffs, which is kind of weird, right? She's gonna give taunt, she only gives taunt to the main unit, by the way, the one at the middle. The other ones she doesn't give taunt to. But it's weird, right? You're giving a taunter like offensive buffs? Why would you do that? And well, she has this skill over here, which gives 60% more support for every ally that has died. So what ends up happening, let's say like 5 allies have died, that's 300% extra support, which makes it really insane. And when coupled with her offensive buffs, anyone she buffs, like later on as units die, is gonna have a lot of damage. So as she's paired with Mamone, and Mamone has pretty good damage already, when paired with Mamone, Mamone is like one of the best DPS units in the game. No, not one of the best DPS units, but she's a really solid damage dealer, besides being a tank, right? Which is pretty crazy. And something else you can do is like buff, it doesn't need to be Mamone, right? Any taunted, any unit you want to taunt, and you can put your DPS in one of the corners and he will get the offensive buffs as well. Though, of course, there's a lot of risk to that. You're very close to the Taunter, so that can be kind of complicated, but it's definitely interesting. She's one of my favorite units, actually, and she's really good. She is seeing a lot of use with Mammoni. It's kind of a new type of deck emerging right now, which is very similar to Grand decks and Themis decks. But yeah, she's really good and works amazingly well with Mammoni. And well, that's pretty much it, right? We don't have any other units to talk about. That's it for now. If more, of course they're going to be released. As new units are released in Korea, I'm going to be making specific videos for them as well. And well, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys.